So it has been 2 years since I started using Starlink. I will link my videos up above of my initial review. And I do want to say, Starlink is not for everyone. I get the comments on every Starlink video, oh, my fiber is a fourth of the price and it's 10 times as fast. That's great, then you should definitely use that and don't use Starlink. But for some people, they don't have fiber, they don't have those options, and I am one of them. The only internet options I have at my house are either Starlink or LTE phone internet. And I switched to Starlink and it has been so much better. So what has changed since the beginning? So this is my 2-year review. I did a 1-year review as well. Not much has changed, although the things that have changed have only been for the better. So number one, the price is still $110 a month. So it started at $99, all the crazy inflation stuff happened, and they raised the price by $11 a month. So I was worried that they were gonna keep raising the price, but now Starlink is profitable. So hopefully they can make the price back down a little bit. For us on the basic tier, I'm on kind of the lowest tier. There are, I guess I should say, different dishes you can get. You can get the bigger one and the smaller one. I have the first square version, so I don't have the big advanced square version that can technically get faster speeds, but on X, I was talking with Scott Walter, and he did a test with the 2, and he, it did get faster speeds, kind of. Like, kind of hit or miss. Definitely probably not worth the price to go with that bigger dish. My dish has been serving me really well, and it's also on my roof, which we'll talk about installation in a minute, so I don't want to reinstall it. Data caps. So when Starlink first came out, there were no data caps. Then at some point in that first year, they were like, oh, okay, we have data caps. And you had unlimited use at night and data cap in the morning of 1 terabyte a month. Well, Starlink has gone back on that and they've gotten rid of the data caps. So now, again, there's no data caps. Now, if you go crazy and you use like 100 terabytes a month or something, they may kind of come at you and be like, hey, what's going on here? We need to charge you above a certain amount. And then there are different tiers you can pay for as well that will give you more data in roaming or whatever. So the first thing I want to talk about is installation, because of course, when you first get it, you have to install the dishy, which is very simple. But over time, is your install good? Is it going to hold up? Are you going to have any problems, especially with different weather? Throughout the 2 years, we've had huge snowstorms, thunderstorms, 60, 70 mile per hour winds. So how is it holding up? So when you first get your Starlink dishy, if there's no obstructions, you can literally take the thing out of the box, plug in a couple of minutes, you'll be online. It is really that simple. Now for me, my house is surrounded by trees, so I had to find a space where the trees were not going to interfere with the dish. Now for me, of course, this ended up being on my roof, which I'm sure a lot of people do. I put it up as high as I possibly could to get it away from any tree obstructions. Now that first year, especially the first 6 months or so, I did have a decent amount of obstructions from the trees, but over time, as SpaceX has added more satellites, which they are doing all the time, the obstructions became less and less to the point where I don't really get them anymore. So installation was decently easy. I've had a lot of people ask me, oh, what service do you go through? How do I get someone to install it? And personally, I just went up on my roof and drilled some holes, and I did it right with the silicone and made sure nothing was gonna leak or whatever. But I went up there and then I ran the cable off my roof. Maybe a professional would have done things slightly differently, but I secured the cables, I routed them the right way and everything. I thought it was pretty simple, although it's not the safest thing, of course, going up on your roof. If you fall or something, you could get hurt, but I mean, you could do that driving your car too. So I don't know, to me, my roof is decently high, but I just went up there and installed it. To this day, 2 years later, with all the wind and the rain and the snow and the ice, dishy has not moved. It is super stable up there. Some of the windstorms, I was a little scared because mine is on a pretty long kind of telescoping rod. And I was like, oh man, this thing, of course, the farther away it is, the weaker it's gonna be. And I was scared that some of this wind was just gonna knock it over. I was gonna walk outside and see the dish just like hanging down and I'd have to go fix it. But it's been perfectly stable and hasn't had any problems. So install was super simple. I drilled a big old hole in the side of my house, shove the cables through. And then for the router, I have the original one. I think there's an updated one now, but again, I don't actually use this part of the Starlink equipment. I use my own router, hardwired, and I have my house kind of hardwired. I have Ethernet going all over the place. Now, it's interesting because the router and all of the Starlink stuff is actually weatherproof. So if you were using this outside, you don't have to worry about your router or your dish or anything. It's all weatherproof. I also have the Ethernet adapter. You have to buy that separately, so you can put an Ethernet cable coming out of the Starlink and into whatever you want. Now, for the longest time, I actually just had my router sitting on the floor, but that wasn't very nice. I wanted to take better care of it. So I switched to this Starlink wall mount, which helps me mount it on the wall. It looks really nice, and they just also happen to be the sponsor of this portion of the video. On top of being super easy to install, this item makes your Starlink router look awesome. I could see setting this up like right in your living room because the Starlink router by itself already looks really nice, having the orbit of Mars and Earth. This mount is super sturdy and will keep your router safe in a nicer location, and I was really happy to get mine off the floor. It only took took me a couple minutes to install, and there's also a bracket for the Ethernet adapter which I also attached to the wall. If you are interested in this wall mount kit, I will leave some big discounts down below, so be sure to check those out. So most important for internet connectivity is either the reliability or the speed or the latency. If any one of those is bad, you're not gonna have a very good time. You really want them all to be good. And I'm happy to say that they are all good with Starlink. Now let's talk about speed first. So over the past year, every once in a while, I'll see somewhere above 200 megabits per second downloads. But what I have noticed over the past year is the minimum. It is very normal now for me to see above 100 megabits per second pretty much any time I check. Now, not that that speed is a top speed and it's the fastest I've ever seen, but it used to be more common to dip below that than it is these days. Upload speeds have not changed very much either. The most I've ever seen is around 30 megabits per second, and I only saw it one time. Usually we'll hover around 15 to 20 megabits per second upload, which for me, again, it was a huge improvement from my old internet. Sometimes it'll dip down to the 5s or even lower, but normally you're somewhere in the 10 to 20 range for uploads, and it has actually helped me a lot with making these YouTube videos and getting faster uploads, although I really wish we could get something faster. I mean, even if they could double these speeds, I don't know if there's something with physics or some other reason that this speed is so much lower, but 50 megabits per second upload would be a huge quality of life improvement for me specifically, so I would love to see that. Now, latency is really good fiber connection. You're never gonna beat it. You're not even gonna come close. But in the day-to-day, actually using Starlink, I don't notice at all. So doing speed tests, you'll see like 30 millisecond latency. In most of the games, I'm gonna do a whole gaming section later, but most games you usually hover around 60 or 70 milliseconds, and sometimes it'll get up into the 90s, and if we get much above that, I'll start to notice it depending on, you know, what kind of game I'm playing. Latency is good in practicality. If you look at the numbers, I mean, it's going to be like 5 times the latency of a fiber connection. In my day-to-day doing video calls, I do meetings for work on here, and for the most part, I don't have any issues. Latency is really good. Talking back and forth with people, you don't notice like a weird delay, you know, how it can kind of get awkward when that happens. I am very happy with latency. When people see the number, they sometimes kind of scoff at it and they say it's really bad. But again, practically day-to-day, I think latency is great. Now let's talk reliability. So this is really important for any internet. And having like a satellite-based internet, this and latency is where I thought the problems were really gonna be, because it's so complicated, right? You have to have satellites flying over, your dish has to connect to them, there can't be anything in the way. Well, reliability is actually amazing with Starlink. In the past year, we've had one major global outage, and it lasted, I think it was a couple hours, so it was pretty significant. Every service goes out sometimes, nothing is perfect, and having that one major outage, I was very happy with that. In my area in Michigan where we live, it's pretty common for hundreds of thousands of people per year to lose power to their house. And when that happens, say you have a backup generator, even if you have electricity, if something goes wrong with the cables, the fiber coming to your home, at some point along the line, you'll also lose internet. So you can't do anything about that with a Tesla Powerwall or a gas generator. With this service, when the power goes out here, because we have Starlink and we have power, we still have internet. So I cannot believe I'm saying this, but in my experience and talking with people in my area and also talking with some people online, reliability seems to be better than the local internet service providers around here. They are going down more often than Starlink. I can't believe that's coming out of my mouth, but that's been the experience the past year. So I am ecstatic with that result. Now here is where reliability is gonna drop, especially when you compare it to a fiber line, and we are talking heavy precipitation. So if you have a lot of rain or a lot of snow, you are gonna lose connection, or your connection is gonna severely slow. So over the summer, we will sometimes get really heavy rainstorms where it's just like this insane downpour. And when that happens, the Starlink is gone. There is zero connection. The Starlink, nothing. It's gone until that rain lets up. Now, as soon as the rain, you know, kind of lets up a little bit, it can be raining, of course, still, then the connection will resume pretty much immediately. But you'll have a few minutes here and there where you won't get connection. Same thing with the snow. If it's snowing really hard, the dish is heated, so it can melt the snow off. The snow is not gonna build up on there and block your signal. But if a lot of snow is happening all at the same time dropping from the sky, it will slow your signal first, and then if it's heavy enough, it will actually completely block your signal for short periods of time. Now, although that is annoying, I would guess it's probably happened 5 times in the past year. So it's extremely rare. And it only lasts a few minutes when it does happen, but it is something you need to think about. Now, if there's moderate precipitation, it's not too heavy, you will probably see your latency up. You might get, if you're doing something like a live stream, you need like a constant connection or like a video call, you will see like weirdness here and there if there's a decent amount of precipitation. Light precipitation doesn't seem to affect anything, so that's good. I had a live stream on YouTube I was doing. It was actually a pretty important live stream to me. I was talking with Corey Steuben, and it started, I didn't even know it was going to rain that day. I had no idea. And it started raining like crazy. So we lost connection. It was coming back on and off, but I think it was about 15 minutes or so, maybe 10 minutes. And I was just gone. No internet, nothing I could do. Luckily, I was doing that live stream through StreamYard, and that service holds the connection open to YouTube. If I was just live streaming like from my computer and the internet went down, we would have just been gone. Like the whole stream would have been killed. It would have ruined like my whole, it would have been really bad. Luckily, StreamYard kind of kept it open. I was able to reconnect, and Corey was on there with no problem kind of talking to people. So whenever I start my live streams, I kind of say like, oh, just so you know, I'm on Starlink. So if it gets weird, but I did a live stream actually earlier today and 0 issues. Actually, the person I was talking with also was using Starlink as well, and they had no issues. So I think the whole stream was like exactly perfect with 2 people using Starlink live streaming and video chatting with each other. So it's very reliable. Of course, nothing's perfect, so you will, run into some issues here and there. Customer service. So I don't have an update for you on this because I haven't needed them in the past year. I haven't needed them one time, which is great news. So I don't know how well they will handle any issues you do run into, but I did need them the first month I had Starlink. And what happened? I think it was just the obstructions for my trees, honestly. But I didn't know what was going on. And I asked them like when I use the app, it says it's clear, but I'm still having all these obstructions. I think it was the trees, but I wasn't sure. And they immediately responded. They were texting me back and forth in the app, and then they gave me my first month free. They were like, we're so sorry you're having these issues. We're gonna cover your first month. So they gave me that $99, and that was awesome. So the customer service experience I've had was great. Now, due to this reliability and it being such a good service, we actually finally got rid of our backup internet about 4 or 5 months ago. So before we had Starlink, we basically used an LTE hotspot, although it was like industrial grade modem, and I put an antenna in the attic. I did all this fancy stuff to make the signal the best that I could get and make it as fast as possible. And we kept it. We kept the whole setup up until a few months ago because we just weren't sure. We didn't want Starlink to go out and then we have 0 internet in the house, nothing works. And it has just been so rock solid over the past 2 years. And actually what's funny is during the global outage I talked about earlier, we still had that hotspot, and I went to hook it up and it wasn't working. So I was like, okay, great. So I'm paying for this, and then I go to use it as a backup and it's failing me at this point. I was able to fix it and get it running, but it was like, you know what, forget it. We can live without internet for even, a couple days, like whatever, if it happens. We'll use hotspot on our phone, and that's what we'll do. So we were able to reduce some of our costs by getting rid of that backup internet we had. And then I did want to give a whole section to gaming because I have gotten this question so much. Can you game on Starlink? Is the latency too high? Good for it, and it is amazing. It is so much better than the old LTE internet we used to use. The speeds are faster, which for gaming you don't really need fast speeds. You need solid connection and low latency. So when I first got Starlink, no, I could not game on it at all. It just didn't work. I was constantly losing connection. Some games are really sensitive to that, where if you lose connection for even a fraction of a second, it'll just boot you out of the whole thing. Other games, you can lose connection for 10 seconds at a time, and then you'll just kind of resume where you left off. Well, now Starlink is so solid. My buddy that I play with in England, he lives in London, so obviously he has fiber internet. It's really good internet, and he'll actually get booted every once in a while because his internet will mess up. Now, it's just so funny compared to how it used to be because my LTE used to boot me every once in a while, and then Starlink, when I switched to that, was like even worse. And now it's kind of like the tables have turned, and my internet seems to be more stable than his. If you have any questions, leave those down below, and you will see me in the next video.